The invitation arrived on cream-colored cardstock with Emma's elegant cursive announcing her wedding to David Rodriguez at Sunset Ridge Vineyard. I traced my finger over the raised lettering, feeling proud of my little sister's careful attention to detail. What I didn't see then was the small notation on the back of the RSVP card in Emma's handwriting. Maya, garden seating, requested. I had simply checked yes, excited to celebrate the biggest day of her life, never imagining what those 3 words would mean when I walked through those vineyard gates. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning of Emma's wedding dawned crisp and golden across Napa Valley, the kind of October day that makes you believe in fairy tales. I had driven up from Oakland at sunrise, my bridesmaid dress hanging carefully in the back seat, a gift bag filled with Emma's favorite lavender soap, and a handwritten letter expressing how proud I was of the woman she'd become. The letter had taken me 3 drafts to write, pouring out memories of our childhood, of how I'd helped her through her anxiety attacks in college, of the night she called me crying because she thought David was going to break up with her, and how I'd talked her through it until dawn. As I pulled into the gravel parking lot of Sunset Ridge Vineyard, my heart swelled with anticipation. The venue was even more beautiful than the photos Emma had shown me during our planning session. Rolling hills covered in autumn gold grapevines stretched toward the horizon, while ancient oak trees provided pockets of shade across the property. The main building was a restored Victorian mansion painted in soft sage green, with wraparound porches and ivy climbing the wall. Everything looked perfect, exactly as Emma had dreamed. I checked in with the coordinator, a harried woman named Jessica, who seemed to be managing 12 different crises simultaneously. She glanced at her clipboard when I gave her my name, and I noticed a slight frown cross her features before she quickly smiled and handed me a small card with a table number. Maya Chen, wonderful, you're at table 7, just follow the stone path around to the garden terrace. The ceremony begins in an hour. Something in her tone felt odd, but I dismissed it as pre-wedding stress. I made my way toward the bridal suite to find Emma, navigating through clusters of guests who were already gathering near the main building. The air buzzed with excitement and the soft murmur of conversations about how beautiful everything looked, how perfect the weather was, how lucky Emma was to have found such a magical venue. The bridal suite was a flurry of activity. Emma stood in the center of the room like a vision in white silk, her dark hair swept up in an elaborate updo that our cousin Jake's wife had spent 2 hours creating. She was surrounded by 6 bridesmaids in dusty rose dresses, each one fussing over different details. Her makeup artist added final touches while the photographer captured every moment. Emma looked radiant, but I could see the familiar tightness around her eyes that meant she was fighting nerves. Maya, Emma called out when she spotted me in the doorway. You made it. How do I look? Do you think the dress is too much? The photographer wants to do family photos before the ceremony, but I'm worried we'll run out of time. Her words tumbled out in the rapid-fire way they always did when she was anxious. I crossed the room and took her hands in mine. Emma, you look absolutely stunning. David is going to lose his mind when he sees you walking down that aisle. I squeezed her fingers gently. Everything is perfect. Just breathe. She exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing slightly. You always know exactly what to say. I don't know what I'd do without you, Maya. You've been my anchor through all of this. One of the bridesmaids, a college friend named Stephanie, appeared at Emma's side with a champagne flute. Emma, we need to get you hydrated, and the photographer is asking for the immediate family shots now. Yes, of course, Emma said, turning back to me. Maya, you should probably head to your seat. The ceremony is starting soon, and I know you hate being late for anything. I felt a small twinge of something I couldn't quite name. I thought I might be in the family photos, since Patricia isn't here yet. Oh, Mom's already outside with the photographer, Emma said, her attention already shifting to the bustle around her. She's been coordinating everything. You know how she gets at these things. I nodded, though something felt off. Patricia Chen had always been a take-charge person, but it seemed strange that she hadn't come to check on Emma in the bridal suite. Well, I'll go find my seat then. I love you, Em. Today is going to be beautiful. Love you too, she called over her shoulder, as Stephanie guided her toward the photographer. I made my way back down the stairs and out of the main building, following the stone path toward the garden terrace. The closer I got, the more confused I became. The path led away from the main ceremony area, where I could see rows of white chairs arranged in perfect symmetry facing an altar decorated with cascading flowers. Instead, I found myself in a secluded corner of the property, where a small cluster of round tables had been set up on a flagstone patio, surrounded by olive trees. Table 7 was positioned at the very edge of the space, partially hidden behind a large planter filled with ornamental grasses. The other tables were populated by people I didn't recognize, mostly older guests who seemed to be chatting quietly among themselves. As I approached my assigned seat, I realized with growing bewilderment that this wasn't ceremony seating at all. This was reception seating, and I was seated so far from the main event that I could barely see the altar through the trees. A woman at the neighboring table noticed my confusion. "Are you looking for the ceremony, dear? It's back that way, past the main building." "I was told this was my seat," I said, holding up the card Jessica had given me. She looked puzzled. "Oh, you must be overflow seating. Sometimes when venues get overbooked, they have to get creative with the arrangements." Overflow seating. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there holding my table card, trying to process what was happening. Emma's wedding wasn't overbooked. I had helped her with the final head count just 2 weeks ago. 138 guests, well within the venue's capacity. There was no reason for overflow seating, and certainly no reason for me to be relegated to a corner where I couldn't even see my own sister get married. I pulled out my phone and called Patricia. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Maya, honey, are you here? The ceremony is about to start." "Mom, I think there's been a mistake with the seating arrangements. I'm at table 7, but it's back in the garden area. I can't see the ceremony from here." There was a pause, and when Patricia spoke again, her voice had taken on that careful, measured tone she used when she was choosing her words deliberately. "Oh, sweetie, that's the overflow area. The main ceremony space filled up, so they had to put some of the additional guests in the garden. It's actually quite lovely back there. Very intimate." "Additional guests?" I felt my stomach drop. "Mom, I'm not an additional guest. I'm Emma's sister." "Of course you are, honey. And you'll have a wonderful view of everything from the garden. The important thing is that you're here to celebrate Emma's special day." I looked around at the elderly strangers at the surrounding tables, at the ornamental grasses that blocked my view of the altar, at the single table card with my name on it. "Where is everyone else sitting?" "Where are you sitting?" "I'm up front with the immediate family." "Of course." "Maya, I really need to go. The processional is about to begin, and I want to make sure I'm in my seat." The line went dead. I stood there in the garden terrace, holding my silent phone, as the reality of the situation crashed over me. I wasn't seated in overflow because of space constraints. I was seated in the garden because someone had decided I didn't belong with the immediate family. Someone had made a deliberate choice to place me where I couldn't see my sister's wedding ceremony, couldn't participate in the moment I had been looking forward to for months. The sound of string music drifted from the main ceremony area, signaling the start of the procession. I could hear the rustle of guests standing, the soft murmur of appreciation, as the wedding party began their walk down the aisle. From my position behind the planter I could catch glimpses of movement through the trees, but I couldn't see Emma. I couldn't see my sister on the most important day of her life. I sank into the chair at table 7, my hands shaking slightly, as I placed my purse on the table. The elderly woman at the next table leaned over with a sympathetic smile. "First time being relegated to the Siberia seat." "Siberia seats?" I managed to ask. "That's what my granddaughter calls them, the tables where they put the people they have to invite but don't really want to see." She patted my arm gently. "Honey, you look like you're about to cry. What's wrong?" I opened my mouth to explain, but the words wouldn't come. How could I tell a stranger that my own sister had seated me in Siberia, that after years of being Emma's emotional support, her financial backup, her constant cheerleader, I had been deemed unworthy of witnessing her wedding ceremony? The string music swelled, and I knew Emma was walking down the aisle. Somewhere beyond the trees and planters, my little sister was having her fairy tale moment, and I was missing it entirely. I thought about the letter I had written, sitting in my car along with the gift bag, filled with love and pride and memories. I thought about the dress I had bought specifically for this day, the time I had taken off work, the careful planning to make sure everything was perfect for Emma's wedding. A server appeared at my elbow, offering champagne from a silver tray. Would you care for some champagne? The ceremony should be finishing up soon, and then we'll be serving cocktails before dinner. I accepted the glass mechanically, barely registering the server's presence. Through the trees, I could hear the officiant's voice, though I couldn't make out the words. I strained to listen, hoping to catch some piece of Emma's vows, but the distance and the natural barriers made it impossible. Maya? I turned to find a man in his 50s approaching my table. He was tall and broad-shouldered with graying hair and kind eyes, wearing a suit that suggested he worked at the venue. I'm Bobby Sullivan, the owner of Sunset Ridge. I noticed you seemed upset. Is everything all right? I looked up at him, this stranger who had taken the time to check on me when my own family hadn't. I'm fine, thank you. Just taking in the beautiful scenery. Bobby glanced around the garden terrace, then back at me with a perceptive expression. You know, in 30 years of hosting weddings, I've learned to read people pretty well. You don't look like someone who's enjoying the scenery, you look like someone who's been hurt. Something in his tone broke through my composure. I'm the bride's sister, I said quietly. I'm supposed to be watching her get married right now, but apparently I'm not important enough to sit with the family. Bobby's expression darkened. What do you mean? I was assigned to table 7. I can't see the ceremony from here. I can't even hear it properly. I gestured toward the trees that blocked my view. I don't understand why I'm sitting back here with strangers when I should be in the front row, watching my sister say her vows. Bobby was quiet for a moment, studying the layout of the garden terrace with a professional eye. Maya, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. When you made your reservation, did you request garden seating? I didn't make a reservation, I just RSVP'd yes to the wedding invitation, and the bride or her family arranged the seating. I nodded. Bobby's jaw tightened. I see. Maya, I want you to know that this isn't how we normally handle family seating. In fact, this is the first time I've ever seen a bride's immediate family member placed in the garden area during the ceremony. The ceremony music was reaching its crescendo, and I could hear distant applause. Emma and David were married now, officially husband and wife, and I had missed the entire thing. I felt tears threatening at the corners of my eyes. I'm sorry, I whispered. I don't want to cause any trouble. I just wanted to see my sister get married. Bobby was quiet for a long moment, then he straightened up. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. With a decisive expression. Maya, would you like to see your sister? Really see her? I looked up at him, confused. The ceremony is over, but the reception hasn't started yet. There's going to be a cocktail hour, and then dinner and dancing, and I have an idea that might make this evening a little more special for you. Before I could ask what he meant, Bobby was walking away, speaking quietly into a radio clipped to his jacket. I watched him go, wondering what he could possibly do to fix this situation. The damage was done. I had missed Emma's wedding ceremony because my own family had decided I didn't belong in the front row. The guests from the ceremony began filtering toward the cocktail area, their voices bright with excitement about how beautiful everything had been. I caught glimpses of Emma and David in the distance, surrounded by well-wishers and photographers. Patricia moved through the crowd like a gracious hostess, accepting compliments about the venue and the flowers. None of them came to find me. I sat alone at table 7, watching the celebration unfold around me while remaining essentially invisible. The elderly guests at the neighboring tables were kind enough, making small talk about the weather and the beauty of the vineyard, but I felt like I was watching Emma's wedding through a window, present, but not really participating. That's when Bobby Sullivan returned, and everything changed. Maya, he said, approaching my table with a warm smile, I've been thinking about your situation, and I'd like to make you an offer. I looked up at him, this venue owner who had shown me more kindness in 10 minutes than my own family had shown me all day. What kind of offer? Well, it turns out that we have a special suite upstairs in the main building that's reserved for VIP guests. It has a private balcony that overlooks the entire reception area, and it comes with dedicated service staff. The suite was supposed to be used by the bride's family for getting ready, but it seems like they've finished with it. I stared at him. I don't understand. Maya, you're the bride's sister. In my book, that makes you VIP family, regardless of where someone decided to seat you for dinner. If you'd like, I can have you moved to the suite for the rest of the evening. You'll have the best view in the house, private service, and all the space you need to enjoy the celebration. I felt my throat tighten with emotion. Mr. Sullivan, I can't possibly accept that. It must be incredibly expensive. It's Bobby, and it's not about the money, it's about treating people right. He extended his hand to me. What do you say? Are you ready to see your sister's wedding reception from the best seat in the house? I looked around the garden terrace one more time, at the table where I had been forgotten, at the planter that blocked my view of the celebration. Then I looked at Bobby Sullivan, the stranger who had noticed my pain and chosen to do something about it. Yes, I said, taking his hand. I think I am. Bobby guided me through a side entrance of the main building, past bustling catering staff, and up a narrow staircase I hadn't noticed before. The hallway was lined with vintage photographs of the vineyard through the decades, showing the transformation from a working farm to the elegant wedding venue it had become. At the end of the corridor, Bobby opened a door with an ornate brass key. "Welcome to the Founder's Suite," he said, stepping aside to let me enter first. The room took my breath away. It was spacious and beautifully appointed, with antique furniture and soft lighting that created an atmosphere of refined elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the vineyard, while French doors opened onto a private balcony that overlooked the entire reception area. From this vantage point, I could see everything: the cocktail tables scattered across the main terrace, the dance floor that had been set up for later, and the head table where Emma and David would be sitting for dinner. "This is incredible," I whispered, stepping out onto the balcony. The view was breathtaking. I could see the entire wedding party mingling below, their laughter and conversations floating up like music. "The suite comes with full service," Bobby explained, gesturing to a small kitchenette area. "Our staff will bring you anything you need throughout the evening. There's also a selection of wine from our private reserve." He paused, his expression becoming more serious. "Maya, I want you to know that what happened today isn't right. Family should be treated like family, especially at weddings." I felt tears prick my eyes again. "I just don't understand why Emma would do this. We've always been close. I've been there for her through everything." "Sometimes people get caught up in the pressure of planning the perfect wedding," Bobby said gently. "They lose sight of what really matters. But that doesn't make it hurt any less." A knock at the door interrupted our conversation. A young woman in a crisp white shirt and black vest entered, carrying a silver tray with champagne and an assortment of appetizers. "Miss Chen, I'm Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you this evening. Can I get you anything else to start?" I looked at Bobby, still hardly believing this was happening. "I don't know what to say. This is incredibly generous. Just enjoy the evening," he said. "And Maya, if you need anything at all, just ask Sarah. She'll find me." After Bobby left, I stood on the balcony watching the cocktail hour unfold below. From this elevated position, I could see the entire choreography of the reception. Emma moved through the crowd like a queen, her white dress trailing behind her as she accepted congratulations and posed for photographs. David stayed close by her side, his hand resting protectively on her back. They looked happy, genuinely radiant with joy. Patricia was in her element, playing the role of mother of the bride with practiced grace. She guided relatives toward the photographer, coordinated with the catering staff, and ensured that everything ran smoothly. I watched her embrace Emma's new mother-in-law, both women beaming as they welcomed each other into their expanded family. What struck me most was how seamlessly the celebration continued without me. No one seemed to notice my absence from the garden terrace. No one was looking around wondering where Emma's sister had gone. The wedding was proceeding exactly as planned, with or without my presence. Sarah appeared at my elbow with a fresh glass of champagne. "The lamb sliders are particularly good," she said, indicating the appetizers on the tray. "And Bobby wanted me to let you know that dinner will be served downstairs in about an hour, but you're welcome to have yours brought up here if you prefer." Actually, I think I'd like to stay up here. The thought of rejoining the celebration, of pretending that nothing had happened, felt exhausting. The view is perfect from here. As the sun began to set over the vineyard, the lighting below transformed the reception area into something magical. String lights twinkled between the trees, candles flickered on every table, and the warm glow of the evening created an atmosphere of romance and celebration. I found myself getting caught up in the beauty of it all, despite the circumstances that had brought me to this private balcony. The dinner service began, and I watched as guests found their assigned tables and settled in for the meal. Emma and David were seated at the head table with the wedding party, their faces glowing with happiness as they shared toasts and laughter with their closest friends. Patricia sat at a nearby table with other family members, holding court as she regaled them with stories about the wedding planning process. I noticed that table 7, my original assigned seat, had been filled with late-arriving guests who seemed perfectly content with their location in the garden area. They were chatting animatedly among themselves, enjoying the intimate setting and the beautiful surrounding. It occurred to me that my exile to that table hadn't been about space constraints or logistics. It had been deliberate, a calculated decision about where I belonged in the hierarchy of this celebration. Sarah brought me a beautifully plated dinner, herb-crusted salmon, with roasted vegetables and wild rice, accompanied by a glass of the vineyard's signature Chardonnay. The food was exceptional, but I found myself picking at it absently, my attention focused on the scene below. During the toasts, I leaned forward to catch every word, wanting to hear what Emma and David would say about their love story and their future together. Emma's maid of honor, her college roommate Jessica, stood first with her champagne glass ready. "I've known Emma since we were 18, she began, her voice carrying clearly in the evening air. "She's always been the kind of person who brings people together, who makes everyone feel included and loved. Emma, you and David are perfect for each other because you both have such generous hearts." The irony of those words wasn't lost on me. Emma, who brings people together and makes everyone feel included, had specifically excluded me from the most important moments of her wedding day. I wondered if Jessica knew about the seating arrangements, if she had been part of the decision to place me in the garden area. David's best man spoke next, sharing funny stories about their friendship and expressing his confidence in their marriage. The guests laughed and applauded, and I found myself smiling despite everything. David seemed like a good man, and I was genuinely happy that Emma had found someone who loved her so completely. When David stood to give his own toast, his words were heartfelt and genuine. "Emma, you've taught me that love isn't just about the big moments," he said. "It's about showing up for each other every day, in small ways and big ways. You've shown me what it means to be part of a real family, and I'm grateful to all of you for welcoming me." A real family. The phrase echoed in my mind as I watched David raise his glass to Patricia and the other relatives seated nearby. I thought about all the ways I had shown up for Emma over the years, the midnight phone calls when she was anxious, the financial help when she was between jobs, the countless hours of emotional support through breakups and career change. I had been part of her real family for 26 years, but somehow that hadn't earned me a seat at the family table. Emma's toast came last, and I held my breath as she stood, her white dress shimmering in the candlelight. "I want to thank everyone who made this day possible," she began, her voice slightly shaky with emotion. "Planning a wedding makes you realize how blessed you are to have people who love and support you." She went on to thank Patricia for her help with the planning, David's parents for welcoming her into their family, and the wedding party for their patience and dedication. She thanked the vendors, the venue staff and the guests who had traveled from out of town to be there. The list seemed to go on forever, covering everyone who had contributed to the success of the day. She never mentioned me. I sat in the founder's suite, looking down at my sister as she raised her glass in a final toast to love and family, and new beginnings, and I realized that I had been written out of her story entirely, not just relegated to a distant table, but erased from the narrative of her special day. According to Emma's version of events, I simply hadn't been part of making this wedding happen. The dancing began shortly after dinner, and I watched as Emma and David took the floor for their first dance. They moved together beautifully, lost in each other's eyes as they swayed to a song I didn't recognize. Other couples joined them gradually, creating a romantic tableau under the string lights. Patricia danced with David's father, both of them laughing as they attempted to keep up with the music. I found myself thinking about my own father, Michael, who had passed away 3 years earlier. He would have loved this wedding, would have been so proud to walk Emma down the aisle and dance with her during the father-daughter dance. Instead, Patricia had arranged for our Uncle Tom to escort Emma, and he was now spinning her around the dance floor while she giggled like a teenager. Michael had always been the peacekeeper in our family, the one who smoothed over conflicts and made sure everyone felt included. If he had been alive, I never would have been seated in the garden area. He would have noticed immediately and quietly fixed the situation without making a scene. His absence felt particularly acute as I watched the celebration continue without any acknowledgement of my existence. As the evening progressed, I noticed Bobby Sullivan moving through the crowd below, checking on details and ensuring that everything was running smoothly. He was the kind of host who noticed everything, who made sure that every guest felt welcome and cared for. It struck me that this stranger had shown me more consideration in a few hours than my own family had shown me in months. Around 10 o'clock there was a commotion near the main entrance to the reception area. I leaned forward on the balcony, trying to see what was happening. A group of Emma's college friends had arrived late, apparently having driven up from Los Angeles after work. They were still in their business attire, looking slightly frazzled but excited to be there. I watched as Emma rushed over to greet them, her face lighting up with genuine joy. She hugged each of them enthusiastically, exclaiming about how surprised and thrilled she was that they had made the trip. The catering staff quickly set up an additional table for the late arrivals, and Emma personally escorted them to their seats, making sure they had drinks and plates of food. The contrast was stark and painful. Emma could rearrange the entire reception layout to accommodate friends who hadn't even RSVP'd properly, but she couldn't find a way to seat her own sister with the family during the ceremony. These college friends, who she saw maybe once a year, were greeted with more enthusiasm than I had received all day. I was contemplating this when Sarah appeared beside me again, this time carrying a small silver tray with a handwritten note. "This just came for you," she said, setting the tray down on the small table beside my chair. The note was written on Sunset Ridge, letterhead in Bobby's neat handwriting. "Maya, I wanted you to know that I've been thinking about your situation all evening. What happened today isn't just about seating arrangements, it's about respect and recognition. I've been in the hospitality business for 30 years, and I've learned that how people treat their family says everything about their character. You deserve better than what you received today. If you need anything at all, or if you just want to talk, please don't hesitate to ask." Bobby. I read the note twice, feeling a mixture of gratitude and sadness. It was simultaneously comforting and heartbreaking to receive such kindness from a stranger while being ignored by my own family. Bobby had seen what Patricia and Emma had chosen to overlook, that I was a person worthy of consideration and respect. The party below was reaching its peak. The dance floor was crowded with guests of all ages, the bar was busy, and the laughter was infectious. Emma had changed into a shorter reception dress that allowed her to move more freely, and she was clearly having the time of her life. She danced with David, with Uncle Tom, with her college friends, with David's cousins. She posed for countless photographs, her smile never wavering. I tried to imagine what it would have been like to be down there with everyone else, to be part of the celebration instead of observing it from above. I pictured myself dancing with Emma, sharing inside jokes and memories, being included in the family photographs that would commemorate this day for years to come. But that version of the wedding existed only in my imagination. In reality, I was a spectator at my own sister's wedding, watching through glass doors like a character in a movie. Around 11 o'clock, I noticed Patricia looking around the reception area with a slightly puzzled expression. She said something to one of David's relatives, who shrugged and shook her head. Patricia's gaze swept the crowd more systematically, and I realized she was looking for me. It had taken her 4 hours to notice that I wasn't at the reception. I watched as she walked over to table 7, where the late arriving guests were still chatting and laughing. She spoke briefly to one of them, pointing toward the garden area where my original seat had been. The guest gestured vaguely toward the main building, and Patricia's frown deepened. She pulled out her phone and appeared to be calling someone. Probably me. My phone buzzed in my purse, but I didn't answer it. Instead, I turned it to silent mode and set it aside. If Patricia wanted to find me, she would have to put in more effort than a casual phone call. She would have to actually look for me, to acknowledge that my absence mattered. The music shifted to slower songs. As the evening wound down, the older guests began to leave, hugging Emma and David goodbye and congratulating them one more time. The dance floor thinned out, leaving mostly the younger crowd, who seemed determined to party until the very end. Emma and David moved through the remaining guests, thanking everyone personally, and making sure they felt appreciated. I found myself wondering what Emma would say if she knew where I was spending her reception. Would she be embarrassed that the venue owner had felt compelled to rescue her sister from exile? Would she be angry that I had accepted special treatment, instead of quietly accepting my assigned place? Or would she simply not care, as long as her perfect wedding day continued without disruption? As midnight approached, the catering staff began the subtle process of encouraging the last guest to head home. The bar service ended, the music volume decreased, and the cleanup began around the edges of the reception area. Emma and David retreated to a quiet corner with their immediate families, clearly exhausted but happy. I watched Patricia finally approach Emma, gesturing toward the main building and apparently asking about me. Emma's expression showed mild concern, but not the panic I might have expected from someone who had just realized her sister was missing. They talked for a few minutes, with Patricia doing most of the talking while Emma nodded occasionally. Then Emma pulled out her phone and called. This time I answered. "Maya, where are you? Mom says you disappeared from the reception." "I'm fine, Emma. I'm still at the venue." "Well, where are you? We've been looking for you. The party's winding down, and we wanted to say goodbye." The casual tone in her voice was almost more hurtful than being ignored. She spoke as if I had simply wandered off for a few minutes, not as if I had been excluded from the main celebration all evening. "I'm in the founder's suite," I said simply. "The what? Where is that?" "It's upstairs in the main building. Mr. Sullivan, the venue owner, offered it to me when he noticed I was seated in the garden area." There was a pause. "Maya, what are you talking about?" "You were seated with the other guests." "I was seated behind a planter where I couldn't see the ceremony, Emma. I missed watching you get married because I was stuck at a table with strangers in what the other guests called the Siberia seats." Another pause. Longer this time. "Maya, I don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this. Everyone had to sit somewhere." "Emma, I'm your sister. I should have been in the front row watching you walk down the aisle, not hidden behind decorative plants." "Maya, you're being ridiculous. It was just seating arrangement. The important thing is that you were here. Just seating arrangements." The words hit me like a physical blow. After everything that had happened, after spending the entire day feeling invisible and forgotten, Emma was dismissing my hurt as if it were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "You're right," I said quietly. I was here, but I wasn't really part of your wedding at all, was I?" "Maya, what are you talking about? Of course you were part of it. You're my sister." "Am I? Because from where I'm sitting it seems like you've redefined what that means." Emma's voice took on the impatient tone she used when she thought I was being overly sensitive. "Maya, I don't have time for this right now. It's been a long day, and David and I need to get to our hotel. Can we talk about this later?" "Sure, Emma. Go enjoy your perfect wedding night. I'll just sit here in the suite that a stranger offered me because he noticed I was being treated poorly by my own family." "Maya." I hung up the phone before she could finish whatever she was going to say. I sat in the elegant silence of the founder's suite, looking out at the nearly empty reception area below. A few catering staff were collecting linens and breaking down tables, but the magic of the evening was fading as reality set in. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thought. I opened it to find Bobby Sullivan standing in the hallway, looking slightly tired but still maintaining his professional demeanor. "I wanted to check on you before I headed home," he said. "How are you doing?" "I'm okay," I said, though we both knew it wasn't entirely true. "Thank you again for everything today. The suite, the service, the kindness. It meant more than you know." Bobby stepped into the room, his expression thoughtful. "Maya, can I ask you something? What are you going to do now?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, after today, after everything that happened, Are you going to pretend it never happened? Are you going to go back to the way things were? I looked out at the vineyard, where the last of the string lights were being turned off. I don't think I can pretend it never happened. Something changed today, and I don't think it can be unchanged. Good, Bobby said firmly, because you deserve better than what you received today. You deserve to be treated with respect and consideration, especially by your own family. I keep thinking about what my father would say if he could see what happened today. I said, he would be heartbroken. He always made sure everyone felt included and valued. Then maybe it's time to start honoring his memory by demanding that same treatment for yourself. Bobby's words stayed with me as I gathered my things and prepared to leave the founder's suite. Sarah had arranged for a car to take me back to my hotel in Napa, and I sat in the back seat watching the darkened vineyard disappear behind me. The evening had been beautiful and terrible in equal measure. A perfect wedding that had perfectly excluded me from its most important moments. Back at my hotel, I sat on the bed and looked at the gift bag I had prepared for Emma, still unopened and undelivered. The lavender soap, the handwritten letter, the small silver bracelet I had chosen to commemorate her wedding day. None of it had been given. None of it had been shared. Emma's wedding had happened without my gifts, without my presence, without my participation. I thought about Bobby's question. What was I going to do now? The old Maya would have called Emma in the morning, apologized for being dramatic, and pretended that everything was fine. The old Maya would have minimized her own hurt to preserve family harmony. The old Maya would have found a way to make this my fault. But something had shifted during those hours in the founder's suite. Something had changed when a stranger showed me more consideration than my own family. I had been reminded of what it felt like to be treated with dignity and respect, and I wasn't sure I could go back to accepting less. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to Emma and Patricia. It took me several drafts to find the right words, to express my feelings without being cruel or vindictive. I wrote about the years of being taken for granted, about the pattern of my needs being dismissed, about the hurt of being excluded from the most important moments of Emma's wedding day. I wrote about sitting in the garden area, missing the ceremony I had been looking forward to for months. I wrote about watching the reception from above, feeling like an outsider at my own sister's wedding. I wrote about the kindness of strangers and the cruelty of being forgotten by family. Most importantly, I wrote about what I needed going forward. I needed acknowledgement of what had happened. I needed an apology that went beyond "I'm sorry you were hurt" and reached "I'm sorry I hurt you." I needed assurance that this would never happen again, that my place in the family was secure and valued. I ended the email with a simple statement. I love you both, but I can't continue to accept being treated as if my feelings don't matter. I need to know that you see me as more than just someone who will always be there to clean up messes and provide support without expecting anything in return. I read the email one more time, then hit send before I could change my mind. It was well past midnight, and Emma and David were probably asleep in their honeymoon suite, but the message would be there waiting when they woke up. I turned off the laptop and got ready for bed, but sleep didn't come easily. I kept thinking about the evening, about the view from the founder's suite, about Bobby's kindness and Emma's dismissal. I thought about the future, about how relationships change when you finally speak up about being mistreated. The next morning I checked out of the hotel and began the drive back to Oakland. My phone showed several missed calls from Patricia and 2 text messages from Emma, but I wasn't ready to engage with their responses yet. I needed time to process what had happened, to understand how I felt about the choices I had made. As I drove through the rolling hills of Napa Valley, I thought about the conversation I'd had with Bobby Sullivan. He had asked me what I was going to do now, and I was beginning to understand that the answer was everything. I was going to stop accepting less than I deserved. I was going to stop making excuses for people who treated me poorly. I was going to start demanding the respect and consideration that should have been freely given. The wedding was over, but the real work was just beginning. The work of redefining relationships, of setting boundaries, of learning to value myself as much as I valued others. It wouldn't be easy, and it probably wouldn't be comfortable, but it was necessary. Emma had her perfect wedding day, complete with all the details she had dreamed of. But she had achieved that perfection by excluding the people who didn't fit her vision, by prioritizing appearance over authenticity. I had been relegated to the shadows so that her fairy tale could proceed without complication. But I was done living in the shadow. I was done being the sister who could be forgotten without consequence. Bobby Sullivan had shown me what it looked like to be noticed, to be valued, to be treated with dignity. I wasn't going to settle for less ever again. The drive back to Oakland gave me time to think about the future, about how I wanted to handle relationships going forward. I thought about my father, about the kind of person he had been and the values he had tried to instill in us. He had believed in treating people with kindness and respect, in making sure everyone felt included and valued. Emma's wedding had been beautiful, but it had also been a revelation. It had shown me exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy, and it had given me the clarity I needed to make changes. I was grateful to Bobby Sullivan for his kindness, but I was also grateful to Emma for showing me so clearly what I was dealing with. The truth was painful, but it was also liberating. I no longer had to wonder if I was being too sensitive or too demanding. I no longer had to question whether my feelings were valid. Emma's actions had spoken louder than any words could have, and I finally understood the situation completely. As I pulled into my driveway in Oakland, I felt a sense of resolution settling over me. The wedding was over, but my life was just beginning. I was going to build relationships based on mutual respect and consideration. I was going to surround myself with people who valued my presence, not just my service. Emma could have her perfect marriage and her perfect life, but she was going to have to do it without taking me for granted. I was done being the sister who could be seated in Siberia and expected to smile about it. I was done being the family member who could be erased from important moments without consequence. The phone calls and text messages would continue, the pressure to get over it and move on would intensify, but I was prepared for that. I had found my voice in the founder's suite, looking down at a wedding that had proceeded beautifully without me. I had learned what it felt like to be treated with dignity, and I wasn't going to forget. Bobby Sullivan had asked me what I was going to do now, and I finally had an answer. I was going to live differently. I was going to expect better. I was going to honor my father's memory by demanding the same kindness and inclusion that he had always shown others. Emma's wedding day was over, but the consequences of her choices were just beginning. She had gotten everything she wanted, but she had also lost something valuable in the process. She had lost a sister who would always be there, who would always put family first, who would always accept less than she deserved. That sister was gone, replaced by someone who understood her own worth and wasn't afraid to demand appropriate treatment. It was a painful transformation, but it was also necessary. I was finally ready to live as the person my father had raised me to be, someone who treated others with respect and expected the same in return. The wedding was over, but the real story was just beginning. The responses came faster than I expected. By the time I finished my morning coffee on Monday, my phone was buzzing with notifications. Patricia had called 6 times before 8 a.m., and Emma had sent a string of increasingly frantic text messages that started defensive and escalated to desperate. The first message from Emma read, "Maya, I think you're completely misunderstanding what happened. The seating wasn't personal. We had to make difficult decisions about the layout." By the 7th message, sent at 3 in the morning, her tone had shifted entirely. "Please call me, I can't sleep. I keep thinking about what you said, and I'm scared I've ruined everything between us." I read through the messages while getting ready for work, feeling a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. Part of me wanted to call her back immediately, to smooth things over and pretend nothing had happened. That impulse was so ingrained, so automatic, that I had to consciously fight against it. The old Maya would have been on the phone already, reassuring Emma that everything was fine and that she shouldn't worry about it, but I wasn't the old Maya anymore. Something fundamental had shifted during those hours in the founder's suite, watching my own sister's wedding from a distance while being treated with more kindness by a stranger than by my own family. I had tasted what it felt like to be valued and respected, and I couldn't unknow that feeling. Patricia's voicemail was more direct. "Maya, we need to talk about this situation. I understand you're upset, but you're blowing this completely out of proportion. Emma is devastated, and this is supposed to be the happiest time of her life. Please call me back so we can resolve this like adults. The familiar pattern was already emerging. I was being positioned as the problem, the one who was overreacting, the one who needed to be more understanding. My hurt was being reframed as selfishness, my legitimate concerns dismissed as drama. It was exactly what I had expected, but it still stung to see it happening so predictably. I decided to focus on work instead of responding immediately. I had a major presentation to prepare for a client meeting on Wednesday, and throwing myself into the familiar challenge of creative problem solving felt like a welcome distraction. My colleagues at the marketing firm where I worked had no idea what had happened over the weekend, and I was grateful for the normalcy of deadline pressures and brainstorming sessions. Around noon, my assistant knocked on my office door. "Maya, there's a flower delivery for you at the front desk." I walked to the reception area to find an enormous arrangement of white roses and eucalyptus, the same combination that had decorated Emma's wedding ceremony. The card was signed by both Emma and Patricia. "We're sorry you were hurt. Let's talk and work this out. Love, Emma." And the flowers were beautiful, but they felt like a band-aid on a severed artery. The arrangement probably cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month, but it didn't address any of the actual issues I had raised in my email. It was a gesture designed to make them feel better about the situation, not to acknowledge what had actually happened. I asked my assistant to donate the flowers to the hospital across the street, where they could bring joy to people who might actually appreciate them. Then I returned to my office and finally opened my laptop to craft a response to Emma and Patricia. The email I wrote was shorter than my original message, but more direct. "Thank you for the flowers. I appreciate the gesture, but flowers don't address the fundamental issue here. I need to know that you understand why being seated away from the family during your wedding ceremony was hurtful and inappropriate. I need to know that you recognize the pattern of taking me for granted that led to this moment. Most importantly, I need to know that this will never happen again. Until we can have that conversation, I think it's best if we take some time apart." I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then immediately turned off my phone notifications and buried myself in work. The presentation for Wednesday was coming together nicely, and I found myself energized by the creative challenge in a way I hadn't felt in months. It was as if standing up for myself had unlocked some reservoir of confidence I had forgotten I possessed. That evening, I met my friend Jenna for dinner at our favorite Thai restaurant in downtown Oakland. Jenna was one of the few people who knew the full history of my relationship with Emma and Patricia, and I trusted her perspective on complicated family dynamics. She had been asking about the wedding all week, expecting to hear about beautiful flowers and touching vows. "So how was the wedding?" she asked as we settled into our booth. "Did Emma look as gorgeous as she hoped?" I took a sip of my wine and considered how to begin. The wedding was beautiful. Emma looked stunning. The venue was perfect, and I spent the entire ceremony sitting behind a planter where I couldn't see anything that was happening. Jenna's chopsticks paused halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" I told her the whole story, from discovering my table assignment to spending the evening in the founder's suite, courtesy of Bobby Sullivan. I described the hurt of missing Emma's walk down the aisle, the confusion of being treated like an afterthought, and the dawning realization that my exclusion had been deliberate. "They seated you in overflow seating." Jenna's voice was incredulous. "Maya, you're her sister. You should have been in the front row." That's what I thought too, but apparently I was wrong about my place in the family hierarchy. Jenna was quiet for a moment, processing what I had told her. "What did Emma say when you confronted her about it?" "She said I was being dramatic. She called it just seating arrangements, and acted like I was making a big deal out of nothing." "Oh Maya," Jenna reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry. That's not just hurtful, it's deliberately cruel." Hearing someone else validate my experience felt like a weight lifting off my chest. For the past 2 days I had been second-guessing myself, wondering if I was overreacting or being too sensitive. Jenna's clear acknowledgement that Emma's behavior was wrong gave me the confidence to trust my own perceptions. "The thing is," I continued, "it's not just about the seating, it's about years of this pattern. Emma needs something, and I drop everything to help. I need something, and suddenly there are budget constraints, or scheduling conflicts, or other priorities. You've been talking about this pattern for years, Jenna said gently. Remember when Emma lost her job 2 years ago, and you covered her rent for 3 months? And then when you were going through that difficult time with your boss, she was too busy with her new relationship to even return your calls. I did remember, and I remembered making excuses for Emma's behavior at the time. She was stressed about money. She was excited about David. She was going through a lot. I had always been willing to rationalize her self-centeredness as temporary circumstances, rather than recognizing it as a consistent pattern. What are you going to do now? Jenna asked. I don't know. Part of me wants to call her and pretend it never happened. It would be so much easier than dealing with all of this conflict. But I can't unknow what I know now. I can't pretend that I didn't spend her wedding day feeling invisible and forgot. I can't pretend that a stranger showed me more consideration than my own family did. Jenna nodded thoughtfully. You know what I think? I think you're finally ready to stop accepting less than you deserve. It's taken you 32 years to get here, but you're finally ready to demand better treatment. That night, I lay in bed thinking about Jenna's words. Was I finally ready to demand better treatment? The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. For my entire adult life I had been the accommodating one, the understanding one, the one who made allowances for everyone else's behavior. What would it look like to stop doing that? The next morning brought a new development. Bobby Sullivan had sent me a friend request on LinkedIn, along with a message. Maya, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I've been thinking about our conversation on Saturday night, and I wanted you to know that what you're going through takes courage. Standing up for yourself when family is involved is never easy, but it's necessary. If you ever need someone to remind you that you deserve better treatment, please don't hesitate to reach out. I stared at the message for a long time, amazed that this near stranger was offering me more support than my own family had. Bobby had seen what happened at the wedding, had recognized the injustice of it, and had taken action to help. Now he was following up to make sure I didn't lose my resolve. I accepted his friend request and wrote back, "Thank you for your kindness on Saturday and for this message. You're right that it takes courage, and some days I'm not sure I have enough of it, but I'm learning that self-respect isn't optional, and I'm grateful to you for helping me see that." Wednesday's client presentation went exceptionally well. The campaign I had developed was innovative and strategic, and the client was enthusiastic about moving forward with our proposal. My boss congratulated me afterward, noting that I seemed particularly sharp and confident in the meeting. "Whatever you're doing differently lately, keep it up," she said. "You're bringing a new energy to your work that's really impressive." I realized she was right. Standing up for myself with Emma and Patricia had somehow translated into greater confidence in other areas of my life. I was speaking up more in meetings, taking creative risks I might have avoided before, and generally feeling more present and engaged with my work. That evening, Patricia called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up the phone. "Maya, we need to talk about this situation. Emma is beside herself with worry, and you're being completely unreasonable." "How am I being unreasonable, Mom?" "You're acting like we deliberately tried to hurt you, when that's simply not true. The seating arrangements were complicated, and we did the best we could with the space we had." "Mom, Emma invited 138 people to a venue that can accommodate 200. There was no space issue." "Well, maybe there were other factors you don't understand. The point is, you're turning this into a family crisis when it should be a time of celebration." "I'm not turning anything into a crisis. I'm simply asking for acknowledgement that I was treated poorly and assurance that it won't happen again." "Maya, you're 32 years old. You're too old to be having tantrums about wedding seating." The word tantrum hit me like a slap. It was the same dismissive language Patricia had used when I was a child, whenever I tried to express hurt or frustration. My feelings were always characterized as overreactions, my concerns always minimized as childish complaints. "Mom, I'm not having a tantrum. I'm having a conversation about respect and consideration within our family. If you can't tell the difference, then maybe we need to take a longer break from each other." "Maya, don't you dare threaten me. I'm your mother, and I won't be spoken to this way." "Then maybe you should try treating me like your daughter instead of an inconvenience." I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline of the confrontation. I had never spoken to Patricia that way before, had never directly challenged her authority or called out her behavior. It felt simultaneously liberating and terrifying. The phone rang again immediately, but I didn't answer. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony, looking out at the Oakland skyline as the sun set behind the hills. The city looked beautiful in the golden light, and I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't experienced in years. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Maya, please don't shut us out. I know you're hurt, and I want to understand. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow, just the two of us?" I stared at the message for a long time, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to maintain the boundary I had established, but another part of me missed my sister and wanted to believe that she was capable of understanding what had happened. I wrote back, "I'm willing to meet, but only if you're prepared to have an honest conversation about what happened and why it was wrong. I'm not interested in being lectured about my reaction or being told that I'm overreacting." Her response came quickly, "Yes, I promise. I've been thinking about everything you said, and I realize I don't understand something that's obviously important to you. Can we meet at Café Luna tomorrow at 10? Café Luna was a small coffee shop in Berkeley that Emma and I had discovered years ago when she was still in college. It was neutral territory, a place where we had shared countless conversations about her relationships, her career anxieties, and her dreams for the future. It felt appropriate for what might be the most important conversation we had ever had. I arrived at the cafe early, choosing a corner table where we could talk privately. Emma walked in, looking tired and anxious, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her hands were shaking slightly as she ordered her coffee. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as she sat down across from me. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," I admitted. "But I love you, Emma, and I want to believe that we can work through this." "I love you too, Maya. And I've been thinking about what you said in your email, about feeling taken for granted and excluded. I want to understand why the seating arrangements upset you so much." It was a start, but her phrasing still bothered me. "Emma, it wasn't just about being upset. It was about being deliberately excluded from the most important moments of your wedding day. I missed watching you walk down the aisle because I was seated behind a planter where I couldn't see anything. But Maya, there were so many people who needed to be accommodated. David's family, my college friends, all of Mom's relatives. The logistics were incredibly complicated. Emma, you found room for college friends who didn't even RSVP. You rearranged the entire reception layout to accommodate people who showed up unexpectedly. But you couldn't find a way to seat your own sister with the family during the ceremony." Emma was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee absently. "I guess I just assumed you would understand. You're always so flexible and accommodating about things like that. So you took advantage of my flexibility to make room for people who were more important to you." "That's not what I meant, Emma." "That's exactly what you meant. You knew you could stick me in the overflow seating because I would accept it without complaining. You knew you could prioritize other people's experience over mine because I would smile and pretend it was fine." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Maya, I never thought of it that way. I honestly didn't realize how much it would hurt you. But that's the problem, Emma. You didn't think about how it would affect me at all. You made decisions about the most important day of your life without considering my feelings or my experience." "You're right," she said, quietly. "I was so focused on making everything perfect that I lost sight of what really mattered. I was thinking about how the photos would look, how the ceremony would flow, how impressed everyone would be with the venue. I wasn't thinking about you at all." It was the first real acknowledgement she had offered, and I felt a small spark of hope. "Emma, do you understand why that hurt me so much?" "Yes, I think I do. You're my sister, and you should have been in the front row. You should have been able to see everything and be part of the ceremony. Instead, I treated you like you were optional." "Exactly. And it wasn't just about the wedding, Emma. It's about a pattern of taking me for granted that's been going on for years. I'm always there when you need me, but when it comes to your important moments, I'm an afterthought." Emma nodded slowly. "I can see that now. I think I've gotten so used to you being the reliable one, the one who always understands and never complains, that I stopped considering your needs altogether. I don't want to be the sister who never complains, Emma." I want to be the sister whose feelings matter to you. I want to be the sister you think about when you're making important decisions. I want that too, Maya. I want to be better at considering your feelings and including you in the things that matter, but I don't know how to change this pattern we've fallen into. It starts with recognition, which is what we're doing now, and then it continues with action. It means thinking about how your decisions affect me before you make them. It means including me in important moments, instead of assuming I'll be fine with whatever scraps are left over. I can do that, Emma said. I want to do that. But Maya, I need you to help me. I need you to tell me when I'm falling back into old patterns, because I don't always recognize them. I can do that, but only if you promise to listen when I do. I can't keep pointing out problems if you're going to dismiss my concerns as overreactions. I promise. And Maya, I'm sorry about the wedding. I'm sorry about seating you in the garden area. And I'm sorry about missing your walk down the aisle. And I'm sorry about making you feel invisible on what should have been a celebration of our family. It was the apology I had been waiting for, specific and acknowledge or not. I'm sorry you were hurt, but I'm sorry I hurt you. The difference was crucial. Thank you, I said. That means a lot to me. What can I do to make this right? I can't undo the wedding, but I want to do something to show you that I value you and our relationship. I thought about it for a moment. I don't need grand gestures, Emma. I just need consistency. I need you to remember this conversation when you're making decisions that affect me. I need you to think about including me instead of assuming I'll be fine with being excluded. I can do that. And Maya, I want you to know that the wedding wasn't the same without you really being there. I kept looking for you during the ceremony, and when I couldn't find you, I felt like something was missing. You couldn't find me because I was hidden behind a planter in the garden area. I know, and that was wrong. I should have made sure you were where you could see everything. I should have saved you a seat in the front row where you belonged. We talked for another hour, working through specific examples of the pattern we had fallen into and brainstorming ways to break. Emma acknowledged that she had taken advantage of my accommodating nature, and I acknowledged that I had enabled some of her behavior by never speaking up about my needs. I think I was scared that if I asked for more consideration, you would see me as demanding or difficult, I admit. So I kept accepting less than I deserved and hoping you would notice on your own. I should have noticed, Emma said. I should have been paying attention to how my actions affected you. I got so comfortable with you always being understanding that I stopped trying to earn that understanding. As we prepared to leave the cafe, Emma reached across the table and took my hand. Maya, I love you, and I don't want to lose you. I know I have a lot of work to do to rebuild your trust, but I'm willing to do it. I love you too, Emma, and I want to believe that we can have a better relationship going forward. But it's going to require real changes, not just good intentions. I understand, and I'm committed to making those changes. Walking back to my car, I felt cautiously optimistic about the conversation we had just had. Emma had listened, really listened, and she had acknowledged the harm her actions had caused. She had apologized specifically and meaningfully, and she had committed to doing better. But I also knew that real change would take time and consistent effort. One good conversation didn't erase years of problematic patterns. Emma would have to prove her commitment through her actions, not just her words. The next few weeks would be crucial. Would Emma remember our conversation when she was making plans? Would she think to include me in important decisions? Would she follow through on her promise to be more considerate of my feelings? I hoped so, but I was also prepared to enforce the boundaries I had established if she did. I had learned what it felt like to be valued and respected. Thanks to Bobby Sullivan's kindness at the wedding, I had tasted what it was like to stand up for myself and demand better treatment. I wasn't going back to the old patterns, regardless of what Emma chose to do. I had finally learned that my feelings mattered, that my needs were valid, and that I deserved to be treated with consideration and respect. That knowledge had changed me fundamentally, and there was no going back. The conversation with Emma was a good start, but it was only the beginning of a longer journey toward healthier family relationships. I was ready for that journey, ready to be the sister who spoke up about her needs, instead of silently accepting whatever treatment she received. Bobby Sullivan had been right when he said that standing up for yourself when family is involved takes courage, but it also takes something else: the belief that you deserve better. I finally had that belief, and I was ready to act on it. The wedding was over, but the real work of rebuilding our relationship was just beginning. I was hopeful about the future, but I was also realistic about the challenges ahead. Change is difficult, especially when it involves altering long-established family dynamics. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own story. I was no longer the sister who could be taken for granted, who could be excluded without consequence, who could be treated as an afterthought. I was the sister who knew her own worth and wasn't afraid to insist on being treated accordingly. It was a new role for me, but it was one I was ready to embrace. The wedding had been a painful wake-up call, but it had also been a gift. It had shown me exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy, and it had given me the clarity I needed to demand better. Emma's response to our conversation would determine whether we could build a healthier relationship going forward. But regardless of what she chose to do, I had already won the most important victory. I had learned to value myself enough to demand appropriate treatment from others. That was a lesson that would serve me well in all areas of my life, not just in my relationship with Emma. I was ready to apply it to my friendships, my romantic relationships, my professional interactions. I was ready to live as someone who expected respect and consideration, not as someone who was grateful for whatever scraps of attention came her way. The transformation wasn't complete yet, but it was well underway, and it had all started with a wedding seating arrangement that had finally shown me how little I was valued by the people who should have treasured me most. Sometimes the most painful experiences are also the most necessary ones. Emma's wedding had been both painful and necessary, and I was grateful for the clarity it had provided. I was ready to move forward with my eyes wide open, my standards high, and my sense of self-worth firmly intact. 3 months after Emma's wedding, I received an unexpected package at my office. The return address showed Sunset Ridge Vineyard, and inside was a beautifully wrapped bottle of their reserve Cabernet Sauvignon, along with a handwritten note from Bobby Sullivan. Maya, the note read, "I hope this finds you well. This bottle is from the same vintage we served at your sister's wedding, but I thought you might enjoy it under better circumstances. I've been thinking about our conversation that evening, and I wanted you to know that your courage in standing up for yourself has stayed with me. I hope you're continuing to demand the respect you deserve. If you're ever back in Napa Valley, please stop by. I'd love to hear how you're doing. With admiration, Bob." I held the bottle in my hands, remembering that night in the founder's suite, the kindness of a stranger who had seen my worth when my own family couldn't. The gesture felt like a benediction, a reminder of how far I had come since that difficult evening. The past 3 months had been a journey of small victories and necessary adjustments. Emma had indeed tried to follow through on her promises from our coffee shop conversation. She had started including me in family planning discussions, asking for my input on holiday arrangements, and actually listening to my preferences. When she and David decided to host Thanksgiving at their new apartment in Sacramento, she called me first to make sure the date worked for my schedule. "I want to make sure you can be there," she had said during that phone call. "It wouldn't feel like family dinner without you." It was a small thing, but it represented a significant shift in how she approached our relationship. Instead of assuming I would accommodate whatever plans she made, she was actively considering my needs and schedule. The change felt genuine, not performative. Patricia had been slower to adjust to the new dynamic. She still occasionally slipped into her old patterns of dismissiveness, particularly when I expressed opinions that differed from hers. During a discussion about Christmas plans, she had suggested that I should be more flexible about dates, since I was the only one without children to consider. "Mom," I had said, calmly, "my time is just as valuable as everyone else's, whether I have children or not. Let's find dates that work for everyone, not just dates that are convenient for some people." She had looked surprised by my directness, but she had also backed down and worked with me to find mutually acceptable dates. It was progress, even if it felt incremental. The most significant change had been in my own relationship with myself. The confidence I had gained from standing up to my family had rippled out into other areas of my life in ways I hadn't expected. At work, I had started taking on more challenging projects and advocating for my ideas more assertively. When my boss had tried to assign me to a client account that would have required extensive travel during a time when I had personal commitments, I had politely but firmly declined. "I'm not available for that level of travel commitment right now," but I'd be happy to work on the strategy development from here and collaborate with the team remotely for the implementation phase. 6 months earlier, I would have accepted the assignment without question, rearranging my personal life to accommodate work demands. Now I understood that I could set boundaries without being unprofessional or unhelpful. My boss had actually seemed impressed by my clarity about my availability and had found a solution that worked for everyone. I had also started dating again, something I had put on hold during the months leading up to Emma's wedding when I had been so focused on helping her with planning. Through a friend's introduction, I had met Michael, a software engineer who shared my love of hiking and cooking. What struck me most about our early interactions was how naturally he included me in decisions and plans. When we were choosing restaurants for our dates, he asked about my dietary preferences and allergies before making suggestions. When he invited me to a work event, he checked with me about the dress code and timing well in advance. These considerate gestures might have seemed basic to other people, but to me they represented a fundamental respect for my comfort and preferences that I had grown unused to receiving from the important people in my life. "You seem different from other women I've dated," Michael had said after we'd been seeing each other for about 6 weeks. "You're very clear about what you want and what you need. I appreciate that. I haven't always been that way," I had admitted. "I used to be much more accommodating, sometimes to my own detriment." What changed? I had told him about the wedding, about the seating arrangements and Bobby Sullivan's kindness, about the conversation with Emma, and the ongoing work of rebuilding family relationships. Michael had listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions, and expressing genuine admiration for the difficult choices I had made. "It takes real strength to change family dynamics," he had said. "Those patterns are usually decades in the making, and they're incredibly hard to break." "The hardest part is staying consistent," I had replied. "It would be so easy to slip back into old habits, especially when conflict arises." "But you're not doing that." "No, I'm not. I can't unknow what I learned about myself that night at the vineyard. I can't go back to accepting treatment that doesn't reflect my worth." As autumn turned to winter, Emma and I had continued to rebuild our relationship on this new foundation. She had started calling me just to check in, not because she needed something from me. She had remembered my birthday with a thoughtful gift and a handwritten card expressing gratitude for my patience as she learned to be a better sister. When David had gotten a promotion at work, Emma had called to share the news with me before posting about it on social media. "I wanted you to hear it from me first," she had said. "You're important to me, and I want you to feel included in the good things that happen in our lives." These gestures might have seemed small to an outside observer, but they represented fundamental shifts in how Emma approached our relationship. She was thinking about my experience, considering my feelings, making effort to prioritize our connection. The changes felt sustainable because they weren't grand gestures meant to compensate for past wrongs, but rather consistent daily choices to treat me with consideration and respect. The real test came in November when Emma called to tell me that she and David were expecting their first child. I could hear the excitement and nervousness in her voice as she shared the news, and I felt a genuine rush of joy for her. "Maya, I want to ask you something," she had said after we had talked about due dates and doctor's appointments. "I know this might seem premature since I'm only 8 weeks along, but I was wondering if you would consider being the baby's godmother." The request caught me completely off guard. In the old dynamic, Emma would have simply assumed I would want to take on this role and would have announced her decision rather than asking for my input. The fact that she was asking, and asking early enough for me to actually consider it thoughtfully, showed how much she had internalized the lessons from our conversation after the wedding. "Emma, I'm honored that you would ask me," I had said. "Can I think about it? I want to make sure I can be the kind of godmother your child deserves." "Of course, take all the time you need, and Maya, I want you to know that if you say yes, you won't just be a name on a baptism certificate. I want you to be really involved in this baby's life. I want you to be Aunt Maya in the truest sense." A few days later, I had called her back to accept. I would love to be your baby's godmother, but I have some thoughts about what that means to me. I'm listening. I want to be the aunt who shows up for school plays and soccer games. I want to be the aunt who remembers birthdays and takes your child on special outings. I want to be the aunt who's there for the big moments and the small ones. Yes, that's exactly what I want too. And Emma, if you're asking me to be the godmother, that means you're promising to include me in this child's life, in meaningful ways. Not just when it's convenient, but consistently. I promise, Maya. I understand what you're saying, and I agree completely. The conversation had felt like a full circle moment. Emma was not only including me in this major life transition, but she was doing so thoughtfully and with genuine consideration for what the role would mean to both of us. She was thinking ahead about how to avoid the patterns that had damaged our relationship in the past. Christmas that year was different too. Instead of Patricia organizing everything and assigning tasks to everyone else, we had a family meeting to discuss preferences and logistics. Emma had suggested the format, saying she wanted everyone to feel heard and included in the planning process. Maya, what would make Christmas feel special for you this year? Emma had asked during the video call that included Patricia, Uncle Tom, and Emma's new mother-in-law, Carmen. The question had surprised me because it was so direct and inclusive. In previous years, I had usually been asked what I could contribute to celebrations planned by others, not what would make the holidays meaningful for me personally. I'd love to cook something for the family dinner I had. Maybe I could handle the appetizers and dessert. That sounds wonderful, Emma had responded immediately. You make the best chocolate tart I've ever tasted. And Maya, Carmen had added, David mentioned that you're an excellent cook. We'd love to have you share some of your specialty. Even Patricia had seemed to make an effort to include me more genuinely in the conversation. When the topic of gift exchanges came up, she had asked for my opinion about budget ranges instead of simply announcing what she thought was appropriate. Maya makes a good point about keeping things reasonable, she had said when I suggested a lower spending limit. Not everyone is in the same financial situation, and the important thing is being together. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, but it was progress. Patricia was learning to value my input, and to acknowledge my perspective as valid, even when it differed from her own preferences. The Christmas gathering itself had been warm and inclusive. Emma had made sure I was seated prominently at the dinner table, next to David's father, where I could easily participate in conversations. When it came time for family photos, she had specifically called me over to be in the center of the group shots. Maya, come stand next to me, she had said. I want you right here where you belong. The gesture was simple, but it carried deep significance given what had happened at her wedding. Emma was making a conscious effort to include me visibly and prominently in family moments, to ensure that I never again felt forgotten or relegated to the margins. After dinner, Bobby Sullivan had called to wish me happy holiday. We had stayed in touch occasionally since the wedding, exchanging messages about family dynamics and personal growth. His perspective as someone outside the situation had been valuable during the months of rebuilding. How are things going with Emma and your mother? He had asked during our holiday conversation. Better, I had said. Much better, actually. Emma has really followed through on her commitment to change how she treats me. Patricia is slower to adjust, but even she's making effort. That's wonderful to hear. And how are you doing with maintaining your boundaries? Some days are easier than others, I had admitted, but I've learned to trust my instincts about when I'm being treated well and when I'm not. I don't second-guess myself the way I used to. That's the most important thing. Once you know your worth, it's harder for people to convince you to accept less. You know, Bobby, I never properly thanked you for what you did that night at the wedding. You saw what was happening, and you did something about it. You treated me with more kindness and respect than my own family had, and that gave me the clarity I needed to demand better. Maya, you don't need to thank me. I just did what anyone should do when they see someone being treated poorly. But you're the one who had the courage to use that experience as a catalyst for change. That's all you. The conversation had reminded me of how much I had grown since that night in the founder's suite. The woman who had sat behind the planter, missing her sister's wedding ceremony, had been willing to accept that treatment as normal. The woman I had become would never allow herself to be made invisible again. As winter turned to spring, Emma's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and she continued to include me in the journey in meaningful ways. She invited me to come along to one of her ultrasound appointments, where I got to see my future godchild for the first time. She asked for my opinion when choosing nursery colors and furniture. When it came time to plan her baby shower, she put me in charge of coordinating with Patricia and Carmen, trusting me to represent her preferences and make decisions on her behalf. "I want you to be my point person for this," she had said. "You know me well and I trust your judgment completely." The baby shower planning process became another opportunity for our relationship to strengthen. Emma deferred to my suggestions about venues and themes, and when disagreements arose with Patricia about guest lists or catering choices, Emma consistently supported my perspective. "Maya's organizing this for me," she would say when Patricia tried to override my decision. "I've asked her to handle the details and I trust her completely." It was a dramatic reversal from the wedding planning process, when my input had been dismissed or ignored. Emma was not only including me in important decisions, but she was publicly supporting my authority and judgment. The change felt authentic and sustainable. The baby shower itself was a success, with thoughtful details that reflected Emma's personality and preferences. As I watched her open gifts surrounded by friends and family, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not because I had organized a successful event, but because I had been truly included in celebrating this important milestone in Emma's life. During her thank you speech, Emma had made a point of acknowledging my contributions specifically. "I want to thank my sister Maya for organizing this beautiful celebration," she had said. "Maya has always been there for the important moments in my life, and having her coordinate this shower means the world to me. I'm so grateful to have a sister who cares about me and shows that care through her actions." The words had brought tears to my eyes, not just because they were kind, but because they represented recognition of my value that had been missing for so many years. Emma was acknowledging publicly that I mattered to her, that my efforts were seen and appreciated, that I held a special place in her life. When Emma's daughter Sophia was born in late May, I was one of the first people she called from the hospital. I had rushed to meet my new goddaughter, bringing flowers for Emma and a tiny pink outfit I had chosen weeks earlier. Holding Sophia for the first time, I had felt an overwhelming sense of love and responsibility. This little person would grow up knowing me as Aunt Maya, as someone who was consistently present and engaged in her life. I was determined to be the kind of aunt I had wished for when I was growing up, someone who made me feel special and valued and heard. "She's perfect," I had whispered to Emma, as Sophia slept in my arms. "I'm so glad you're here," Emma had replied. "I can't imagine celebrating this moment without you." Over the summer I had settled into my role as Sophia's godmother and devoted aunt. I visited weekly, helping with feeding and diaper changes, giving Emma and David opportunities to rest and reconnect as a couple. When Sophia smiled for the first time, I was there to witness it. When she rolled over for the first time, I was the one holding the camera to capture the moment. These experiences had reinforced the positive changes in our family dynamic. Emma consistently included me in Sophia's milestones, and made sure I felt like an integral part of her daughter's life. She shared photos and videos with me, before posting them on social media, asked for my advice about childcare decisions, and made sure I had plenty of opportunities to bond with Sophia. "Maya, I want Sophia to grow up knowing how important you are to our family," Emma had said during one of my visits. "I want her to see you as someone she can always count on, someone who will always be there for her." "I want that too," I had replied. "And Emma, I want you to know that I see how much effort you've put into changing our relationship. It means everything to me." I had to change. Losing you wasn't an option, and I realized that I was on the path to losing you if I didn't start treating you better. "You were never going to lose me completely," I had said, "but you were going to lose the version of me who accepted being taken for granted. That sister is gone forever." "Good," Emma had said firmly. "I never want to take you for granted again. I want to earn your presence in my life, every day." As Sophia's first Christmas approached, Emma had asked me to help choose her first ornament, and to be part of establishing holiday traditions that would carry forward as she grew up. We had started planning a special Christmas Eve dinner that would become Sophia's introduction to family celebrations, with me playing a central role in both the planning and the execution. "I want Sophia's first Christmas to be perfect," Emma had said, and I can't imagine it being perfect without you being a big part of it. The invitation to help create lasting family traditions felt like the ultimate recognition of my importance in Emma's life. She wasn't just including me in immediate plans, but she was thinking ahead to years of celebrations and milestones, making sure I would be woven into the fabric of Sophia's childhood memories. Looking back on the year since the wedding, I could see how dramatically our family dynamic had shifted. What had started as a painful moment of exclusion had become the catalyst for a complete transformation in how we related to each other. Emma had learned to think beyond her own immediate needs, and to consider my experience when making decisions. Patricia had learned to respect my opinions and to treat my time and preferences as valuable. I had learned to advocate for myself and to refuse treatment that didn't reflect my worth. The changes hadn't always been easy or comfortable. There had been moments of tension when old patterns tried to reassert themselves, conversations that required difficult honesty, and adjustments that felt awkward at first. But the foundation we were building felt solid and sustainable because it was based on mutual respect and genuine consideration for each other's needs. Sophia had become a symbol of this new beginning, a fresh start for our family where inclusion and respect were the norm, rather than the exception. As her godmother, I was committed to modeling the kind of family relationships I wanted her to experience throughout her life. Relationships where people's feelings mattered, where everyone had a voice, where love was demonstrated through consistent actions, rather than just words. The bottle of wine from Bobby Sullivan still sat unopened in my kitchen waiting for the right moment to celebrate. I had decided to save it for Sophia's first birthday when Emma and David and I could toast to the beautiful life we were building together, and to the lessons we had learned about treating each other with the respect and consideration that family deserves. The wedding seating arrangement that had felt like such a betrayal had ultimately become the greatest gift Emma could have given me. It had forced me to recognize my own worth and to demand treatment that reflected that worth. It had shown me that I deserved better than being taken for granted, and it had given me the courage to insist on better. Most importantly, it had taught all of us that love without respect is incomplete, that family relationships require ongoing effort and attention, and that it's never too late to change patterns that aren't serving everyone involved. Sophia would grow up in a family where these lessons had been learned and applied, where she would be valued and included, and heard from her very first breath. The transformation wasn't complete, and never would be entirely finished. Relationships require constant attention and adjustment, ongoing efforts to consider each other's needs and feelings, but the foundation had been rebuilt on solid ground, and I was confident that it would support years of healthy, loving interaction. Emma had kept her promise to be a better sister, and I had kept my commitment to demanding treatment that reflected my value. Together, we had created something new and better than what we had lost, something that would benefit not just us but the next generation of our family. The wedding had ended with me feeling invisible and forgotten. The story that followed had led to me feeling seen, valued, and genuinely loved. It had been a long journey from the garden terrace to Sophia's nursery, from feeling excluded to feeling essential, but every step had been worth taking. Bobby Sullivan had been right when he said that standing up for yourself when family is involved takes courage, but he hadn't mentioned that it also takes faith. The faith that relationships can change, that people can grow, and that it's possible to rebuild something stronger and more beautiful than what existed before. That faith had been rewarded beyond my highest hope. Emma wasn't just a better sister now, she was the sister I had always wanted her to be. And I wasn't just standing up for myself, I was living as the woman I had always been meant to be, someone who knew her own worth and insisted that others recognize it too. The wedding was over, but the real celebration was just beginning. 2 years had passed since that October evening at Sunset Ridge Vineyard when I first understood what it meant to be truly valued. Sophia was now a curious toddler with Emma's bright eyes and an infectious laugh that could light up any room. As her godmother, I had been present for every milestone, from her first steps to her first words, which happened to be Maya, much to everyone's delight. The transformation in our family had become so natural that sometimes I forgot how different things used to be. Emma and I had developed a rhythm of regular communication that went far beyond crisis management or event planning. She called me every Sunday evening just to talk, sharing the small moments of her week along with the significant ones. When Sophia had her first fever, Emma called me at midnight, not because she needed me to do anything, but because she wanted someone who loved Sophia as much as she did to share her worry. Patricia had become a different grandmother than she had been a mother. Watching her with Sophia, I could see glimpses of warmth and patience that I remembered from my earliest childhood before life had made her harder and more controlling. She had started asking for my opinion about gift choices for Sophia and actually listening when I suggested alternatives to the elaborate presents she initially favored. Maya has such good instincts about what Sophia enjoys, Patricia had said to Carmen during Sophia's second birthday party. She knows her personality so well. The acknowledgement had caught me off guard, not because it was untrue, but because Patricia had said it so naturally, without any apparent awareness of how different her attitude toward my judgment had become. The woman who once dismissed my concerns as overreactions now regularly sought my perspective on matters involving our family. Michael and I had been dating for over a year now, and our relationship had deepened in ways that continued to surprise me. He had been patient and understanding as I navigated the complexities of rebuilding family relationships, never pressuring me to move faster or slower than felt comfortable. When I had introduced him to Emma and David at Sophia's first birthday party, the interaction had been warm and easy. "I can see why Maya cares about you so much," Emma had told Michael privately. "You treat her the way she deserves to be treated." "She makes it easy," Michael had replied. "She's clear about her needs, and generous with her affection. I've never had to guess where I stand with her." Later, Emma had pulled me aside to share the conversation. "Maya, I love seeing you with someone who appreciates you properly. You seem so confident and content in ways I never noticed before. I think I'm finally learning what healthy relationships feel like," I had said. "It's easier to recognize them when you've done the work to value yourself appropriately." "I'm grateful you did that work," Emma had said. "It made me a better sister, and it's going to make Sophia's life better too." The ripple effects of standing up for myself had indeed extended far beyond my immediate family. At work, I had been promoted to senior creative director after successfully leading a campaign that won several industry awards. The confidence I had gained from demanding respect in my personal relationships had translated into professional success as well. I no longer hesitated to advocate for my ideas or to push back when clients made unreasonable requests. My relationship with Bobby Sullivan had evolved into a genuine friendship. We exchanged emails regularly, and I had visited Sunset Ridge twice since the wedding, once to attend a wine-tasting event and once to bring Michael for a weekend getaway. Bobby had been delighted to meet Michael and had shared embarrassing stories about my transformation from that first night. When I found Maya sitting behind that planter, she looked like someone who had forgotten she was allowed to take up space. Bobby had told Michael over dinner, "Now, look at her. She commands attention just by walking into a room." "What do you think made the difference?" Michael had asked. "She finally got angry enough to demand better," Bobby had said. "Sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes you have to get mad before you can get clear." During that same visit, Bobby had shown us the guest book from Emma's wedding. Most entries were standard congratulations and well wishes, but there was one comment that had caught his attention at the time. Someone had written "beautiful wedding," but it seemed like someone important was missing from the family photos. "I never figured out who wrote that," Bobby had said, but it confirmed what I had observed. "Other people noticed your absence too." The comment had given me a sense of validation that I hadn't realized I needed. It wasn't just my imagination or oversensitivity that had made the exclusion feel significant. Other guests had noticed that something was wrong with the family dynamics that day. Emma had established new traditions for our family that centered around inclusion and consideration for everyone's needs. When she and David decided to take Sophia on her first airplane trip to visit David's grandparents in Arizona, Emma had called me to coordinate the timing. "I want to make sure we're back in time for your birthday," she had said. "I know we usually celebrate together, and I don't want to mess up that tradition." The fact that she considered our annual birthday dinner a tradition worth protecting showed how much her priorities had shifted. In the past, she would have scheduled the trip whenever it was most convenient for her and David, then perhaps sent a gift to compensate for missing my birthday. Emma, you don't have to plan your entire life around my birthday, I had said, though I was touched by her consideration. Yes, I do, she had replied firmly. You're important to me, and important things get priority in my calendar. When my 34th birthday arrived, Emma had organized a dinner that included not just our immediate family but also Michael, Jenna, and several other close friends. She had chosen a restaurant she knew I loved and had arranged for a custom cake from the bakery where I had once helped her through a panic attack about her engagement party planning. Maya, she had said during the toasts, I want everyone here to know that my sister is the kind of person who shows up for the people she loves, consistently and generously. She taught me what loyalty looks like, and I'm grateful every day that she didn't give up on me when I failed to show her the same loyalty in return. The speech had been moving, but what struck me most was how naturally Emma spoke about my value and importance. There was no hesitation, no qualification, no sense that she was overcompensating for past mistakes. She simply stated my worth as fact, the way someone might comment on the weather or the quality of the food. Patricia had given a shorter but equally meaningful tone. Maya, you've always been the glue that holds this family together, but now you're doing it in a way that honors yourself as well as the rest of us. I'm proud of the woman you've become, and grateful for your patience as I learned to be a better mother to you. The acknowledgement had been unexpected and deeply healing. Patricia had never been one for emotional speeches or public displays of vulnerability, but she had found a way to express recognition of both my contributions and her own areas for growth. The evening had felt like a celebration not just of my birthday but of the relationships we had all worked to rebuild and strengthen. Looking around the table at faces that reflected genuine affection and appreciation, I had felt a profound sense of contentment. These were people who valued my presence, who made effort to include me meaningfully in their lives, who treated me with the consideration and respect I had learned to expect. As summer approached, Emma had announced that she and David wanted to start trying for a second child. The conversation had taken place during one of our regular Sunday calls, and she had specifically asked for my thoughts about timing and logistics. I want to make sure I can still be present for Sophia while dealing with pregnancy exhaustion, she had said. And I want to make sure you're prepared for what it might mean to have two goddaughters instead of one. Are you asking me to be the second baby's godmother too? I had asked. If you're willing. I can't imagine choosing anyone else, but I want to make sure you're comfortable with the responsibility. The request had felt natural rather than assumed. Another example of how Emma had learned to ask for my participation rather than simply expecting. She understood now that my willingness to be involved came from choice, not obligation, and she wanted to honor that distinction. I would be honored, I had said, but let's get through the pregnancy before we start planning christenings. Deal. And Maya, I want you to know that your support during my first pregnancy meant everything to me. Knowing you were there, knowing you cared about Sophia before she was even born, that made me feel like I could handle becoming a mother. You're going to be an amazing mother to two children, I had said. You've learned so much about making people feel valued and included. Sophia and her sibling are going to grow up knowing they matter. They're going to grow up with you as their aunt, Emma had replied. That alone guarantees they'll know they matter. The pregnancy announcement had come a few months later, along with the news that Emma was carrying twins. The ultrasound photos showed two tiny figures nestled together, and Emma had called me immediately after the appointment to share the news. Maya, we're having twins, she had said, her voice filled with excitement and terror in equal measure. Two babies, Maya. I'm going to need so much help. You're going to have so much help, I had assured her. David is going to be an amazing father. Patricia is going to be a devoted grandmother, and I'm going to be the best aunt those babies could ask for. Will you really be their godmother, both of them? If that's what you want, then yes, absolutely. It's what I want more than anything. I want you to be as important to them as you are to Sophia. I want them to grow up knowing they have an aunt who loves them unconditionally. The twins were due in early spring, which would make Sophia almost 3 when they arrived. Emma had already started preparing Sophia for her role as big sister, and I had been included in those conversations in ways that felt natural and organic. Aunt Maya is going to help take care of the babies, Emma had explained to Sophia during one of my visits. And she's going to help take care of you too. Babies cry, Sophia had said, matter-of-factly, displaying the wisdom of a toddler who had observed other families with infants. Yes, they do, I had agreed. But they also smile and laugh and learn new things every day. And you're going to be the best big sister they could have. The conversation had reminded me of how different Sophia's childhood was going to be from mine and Emma. She was growing up in a family where people communicated openly about their needs and feelings, where decisions were made with consideration for everyone involved, where love was demonstrated through consistent inclusion rather than intermittent grand gesture. As Emma's pregnancy progressed, I found myself thinking often about the lessons we had all learned since that difficult evening at Sunset Ridge Vineyard. The pain of being excluded from Emma's wedding had catalyzed changes that had benefited our entire family, including children who hadn't even been born yet. Sophia and the twins would grow up in a family system that had been tested and strengthened, where the adults had learned to treat each other with genuine respect and consideration. The wine Bobby Sullivan had sent me still sat in my kitchen waiting for the perfect moment to open. I had decided to save it for the twins' christening, when our family would gather to celebrate new life and new beginnings. It would be a fitting way to honor the journey we had all taken from dysfunction to health, from taking each other for granted to actively choosing to value each other. Michael had started talking about marriage, not in pressured or demanding ways, but as a natural progression of our deepening commitment to each other. The conversations had been easy and comfortable because we had built our relationship on the foundation of mutual respect and consideration that I had learned to require in all areas of my life. I love how you handle your family relationships, he had said during one of these discussions. You set clear boundaries, but you also extend genuine grace when people show they're willing to change. I want to build that kind of dynamic in our marriage. It wasn't always easy, I had admitted. There were times when I wasn't sure the relationships could be repaired, but I think the work was worth it, because everyone involved became better versions of themselves. That's what I want for us, not perfection, but the commitment to keep growing and improving how we treat each other. The proposal came on a quiet Saturday morning in my kitchen while we were making pancakes for Sophia, who was spending the weekend with me while Emma and David attended a wedding in San Francisco. Michael had hidden the ring in the flour container, and when I reached for it to make the batter, my hand had emerged covered in flour and holding a small velvet box. Maya Chen, he had said, taking my flour-covered hand in his, will you marry me? Sophia had clapped her hands with delight when she understood what was happening, even though she didn't fully grasp the significance of the moment. Later, when I called Emma to share the news, her response had been immediate and enthusiastic. Maya, I'm so happy for you. Michael is perfect for you, and I can't wait to help plan your wedding. Actually, I had said, I was hoping you might be my maid of honor. The silence on the other end of the phone had stretched long enough that I began to worry I had misread our rebuilt relation. Then Emma had started crying. Maya, do you really want me as your maid of honor? After everything that happened with my wedding, Emma, you're my sister. Of course I want you as my maid of honor. We've both grown so much since your wedding day. I trust you completely to help make my day special. I promise I will do everything I can to make your wedding perfect. And Maya, I promise I will never make you feel excluded or unimportant again. I know you won't, I had said, and I meant it completely. The wedding planning process had become an opportunity for Emma to demonstrate how much she had internalized the lessons from our previous conflicts. She deferred to my preferences about every detail, from the color scheme to the venue to the guest list. When I expressed interest in having a small ceremony followed by a larger reception, she had immediately begun researching venues that could accommodate that format. What matters is what you and Michael want, she had said when Patricia suggested a different approach. This is Maya's wedding, and we're here to support her vision, not impose our own ideas. Patricia had accepted the correction gracefully, another sign of how much our family dynamic had evolved. She had offered to help with specific tasks, but had waited for me to assign them rather than assuming control of any aspect of the planning. The wedding was planned for the following fall, exactly 2 years after Emma's wedding at Sunset Ridge. I had chosen a different venue, a botanical garden in Marin County that offered beautiful natural settings without the painful associations of the vineyard. But I had made sure to invite Bobby Sullivan, along with a note explaining how much his kindness had meant to me. His response had been characteristically warm and supportive. "Maya, I would be honored to attend your wedding. I'm so proud of how you've built a life that reflects your worth. Watching you find love with someone who treasures you properly will be one of the great joys of my year." As the wedding date approached, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point. The woman who had sat behind the planter at Emma's wedding, feeling invisible and forgotten, seemed like a different person entirely. I had learned to recognize my own value, to demand appropriate treatment from others, and to build relationships based on mutual respect and consideration. The lessons had extended far beyond my immediate family. In every area of my life, I now approached relationships with the expectation that my needs and feelings would be considered, that my contributions would be acknowledged, that my presence would be valued. It had made me not just happier but more generous, because I no longer gave from a place of desperation for recognition, but from a place of abundance and choice. Emma had kept every promise she had made during our difficult conversation after her wedding. She had consistently included me in important decisions, remembered my preferences and boundaries, and made effort to demonstrate through her actions that she valued our relationship. The changes had been sustained over time, not just performed temporarily to get past the immediate crisis. Patricia had also grown, though more slowly and with occasional setbacks. She had learned to ask for my opinion rather than simply announcing her decisions, to respect my time and commitments, and to acknowledge my contributions to family harmony. The relationship would never be perfect, but it had become genuinely healthy in ways I had never thought possible. Most importantly, I had learned that standing up for yourself doesn't destroy relationships if those relationships are worth preserving. The people who truly loved me had been willing to do the work to treat me better once I made it clear that better treatment was required. Those who weren't willing to make that effort had revealed themselves to be people whose presence in my life wasn't actually beneficial. As I tried on my wedding dress for the final fitting, Emma stood behind me adjusting the buttons with careful attention to detail. In the mirror I could see her face, concentrated and focused on making sure everything was perfect. "Emma," I said, "I want you to know that having you as my maid of honor means everything to me, not just because you're my sister but because of who you've become and how you've chosen to love me. Maya, being your maid of honor is the greatest honor of my life. You saved our relationship by refusing to accept less than you deserved. You taught me how to be a better sister, and now you're letting me prove that I learned the lesson. You've proven it every day for the past 2 years," I said. "I have complete faith in you." The wedding day itself was everything I had dreamed it would be. The botanical garden was in full autumn bloom, with golden light filtering through the trees and flowers, providing a natural cathedral for our ceremony. Michael waited for me at the altar with tears in his eyes, surrounded by friends and family who had gathered to celebrate our love. Emma had organized every detail flawlessly, from the flower arrangements to the timeline to the seating arrangement. She had made sure that every guest felt welcomed and included, that every moment flowed smoothly into the next, that nothing was left to chance. Most importantly, she had made sure that I felt treasured and celebrated throughout the entire day. During her maid of honor speech, Emma had spoken about transformation and growth, about the power of love to change people for the better, about the importance of fighting for relationships that matter. "Maya taught me that love without respect is incomplete," she had said. "She showed me that being family doesn't mean you get to treat people poorly without consequences." She demanded better from me, and in doing so she made me a better person. "Michael, you are getting a woman who knows her own worth and isn't afraid to insist that others recognize it too. Take care of that gift." Bobby Sullivan had attended the reception and had sought me out during the dancing to offer his congratulations. "Maya, you look radiant. This is how weddings should be, celebrations of love where everyone feels valued and included. Thank you for being here," I had said. "And thank you for everything you did that night at Emma's wedding. You showed me what it looked like to be treated with dignity, and that gave me the courage to demand it from everyone else." "You did the hard work," he had replied. I just provided a moment of clarity. Everything that followed was your choice to value yourself appropriately. As the evening wound down and Michael and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, I had taken a moment to look around at the celebration we had created. Emma was dancing with Sophia, who was twirling in her flower girl dress with pure joy. Patricia was chatting animatedly with Michael's parents, sharing stories and laughter. David was taking photos to capture memories that would last a lifetime. It was a scene of genuine love and inclusion, where every person present felt valued and important. It was the kind of celebration I had always dreamed of having, and it had been made possible by the difficult lessons I had learned about standing up for myself and demanding appropriate treatment from others. The transformation that had begun with being seated behind a planter had led to this moment of complete happiness and fulfillment. I had learned to recognize my own worth, to build relationships based on mutual respect, and to create a life that reflected my values and priorities. As Michael and I drove away from the reception toward our new life together, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this point. The pain of being excluded from Emma's wedding had been real and significant, but it had also been the catalyst for positive changes that had improved every aspect of my life. I had learned that sometimes the most painful experiences are also the most necessary ones, that standing up for yourself requires courage but rewards you with authenticity, and that real love expresses itself through consistent consideration and respect. These lessons would serve me well in my marriage to Michael, in my continued relationship with Emma, and our growing family, and in every interaction I would have for the rest of my life. The wine from Bobby Sullivan would finally be opened at the twins' christening in a few months, when our family would gather once again to celebrate new beginnings and the continued growth of relationships built on mutual love and respect. It would be a fitting end to the story that had begun with exclusion and evolved into the deepest kind of inclusion, the kind that comes not from obligation but from choice, not from guilt, but from genuine appreciation, not from habit, but from conscious commitment to treating each other with the dignity and consideration that love requires. The wedding was over, but the real celebration, the celebration of a life lived with authentic self-worth and genuine love, was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.